Hey Dennis,
Hi, Namit.
great to have you here. As we get started, could you tell the audience what you do and what Ypulse does?
Okay, I am a sales director for Western Europe at Ypulse Inc. Ypulse is a youth insights business, so we're in consumer research.
I've had a great time working with you all these months, and in this call,
Likewise.
I'm trying to show off the work that we've been able to accomplish together to the rest of the world. So,
Okay.
before we dive deep into what we've accomplished, could you tell a little bit more about how your sales processes used to look like before Deliverability Ninja?
Okay. So we have different sales tools like Salesforce and salesloft, and we have been sending out our own email campaigns via salesloft. However, recently we have encountered a problem with sending out too many emails, so we were getting blocked, and essentially emails weren't going through. So that's when we reached out to you, or you reached out to us, and we responded because there was a real need for that in our business.
For sure. So, in the past couple of months, how many positive replies we have received after we started working together, and who have you been able to set meetings with?
Okay, so approximately we've had around 50 replies, which is a really good, strong number. And out of those, we've had about 10 meetings, and those are with companies, high caliber companies like Snap, for example, and Skims and ING Bank and Man United, Roblox, Rolex. So quite a few, strong companies there.
Perfect. That's amazing. And were you getting similar companies, meeting with similar companies through outbound before us, or has that been a huge change?
That has been a big step change from us. Also, your process is so helping us with finding the leads and sending out the campaigns and automating the process has made it so much better for us.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Yep. Hey, Dan. Well, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Namit. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Really excited to talk to you. It's been a pleasure working with you guys. And before we get started, I would love for the viewers to know a little bit more about yourself.
Great. So I'm Dan Coates, president of Ypulse. Ypulse has been around for 17 years now, focusing on understanding youth, young people. Our current focus is 13 to 39-year-olds across 7 countries. And basically what we provide is blue chip brands like Apple and Amazon, Netflix, Google, and YouTube, the ability to understand what the behaviors and attitudes of young people are so they can create better products, communicate with them more effectively, make interactions with them seem a little bit more like what young people would prefer from the brands in their lives.
That sounds amazing. So what I hear is you help blue chip brands like Apple and stuff understand more about you. How do they primarily use this data?
Yeah. So usually what we're talking to are folks in the marketing department, sometimes PR, and then most often, consumer intelligence. And then what they're using the information for is just planning, decision making. If you want to build a car, you have to understand what a car driver wants today, project it forward a few years, and you press print on that new car design, and 5 years later it falls off an assembly line. So it's very future planning, strategic, understanding what people want now, what they might want in the future in order to be able to marshal the resources within your organization to deliver on that.
Sounds great. Well, what I'm most interested today to talk about is your sales process. So, jumping into it, could you share a little bit about where you were in your sales journey and how you were doing sales before Deliverability Ninja?
Yeah. We've been reliant on inbound. We create a lot of content, and so we sprinkle that content or share that content fairly liberally in the world. And that results in curious people following up and wanting to find out more. And our website is totally built around inbound, price transparency. We've got a pricing page they can come and see, before even talking to a salesperson, how much it costs. And so we generally had a fairly lightweight sales team that was just processing inbound interest. We even had, folks that had the mindset of we're just servants to the client. We want to help them make an informed decision. So in my mind, there wasn't a lot of selling going on. There was a lot of informing going on, which got us to a certain point. Product-led growth is good. We're a B2B, information provider. But at a certain point, particularly when companies were reducing their spend, relying on product-led growth can really result in some deserts, right? So we had a real desert we were facing and decided, okay, we need to start leaning into outbound a little bit more often. And outbound is tougher to master, to be honest. We tried the SDR route, had somebody dialing for dollars. That didn't really provide much. We had our AEs, reaching out to people and quickly got our hands slapped by Microsoft and our mail service providers who were saying, hey, you can't do that. We were getting complaints. So we were just kind of rudimentary in our outbounding efforts, not really understanding what the issues were. And luckily Deliverability Ninja came along just at the point in time when we were realizing that, we're not in Kansas anymore and we really don't understand what's going on around us right now.
Wow, sounds amazing. So it sounds like there's been a drastic change from the part where you had little to no outbound going on and you were mostly relied on inbound. Could you tell me a little bit more about how has it looked like after working with Deliverability Ninja in terms of meetings booked, leads generated?
Yeah. So I'd say that the first thing that we kind of found is that it's very, outbound, you can lose your way, you can get lost, and then you can get really disillusioned. So I know lots of people who will tell you that they've tried outbound and that it didn't work for them. And what that means is they got lost and they didn't really find their way in the end. What we really liked about Deliverability Ninja is the experience that they had in terms of building outbound. So I'm pretty sure that had we gone down the path ourselves, we would have just, chalked it up as another failed attempt at outbound. It really did take a couple of months for us to kind of see, the prep work and the pre-work that then led to our first outbound campaigns. And even those, didn't really bear fruit right away. But it was when we finally got consistent about our approach. And again, through the help of Deliverability Ninja, guiding us through, helping us understand, seeing what was coming back at us, tweaking it a little bit, trying it again. Now we're actually, I'm happy to say, booked meetings and opportunities based on what Deliverability Ninja has done from an outbound perspective with some companies that, I'm really excited about. Later today, we have a conversation one of our AEs is having with Bose, and that came fully through the folks that make headphones and speakers. That fully came through the outbounding process that Deliverability Ninja set up for us. And so, it's working. We're getting meetings booked and we're getting opportunities that we wouldn't have had before. And I feel like our confidence level is building, and it's really a matter of just kind of dialing this up to greater frequency and more consistency. And we'll have really what we wanted from the start, which is a strong outbound motion.
Amazing. Oh, that sounds great. So one thing that you spoke about was confidence level.
Mm-hmm.
How has your past experiences, was there something in particular that made you feel that there's low confidence in outbound and it did not work before?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there's a lot of people that you'll talk to and that have low confidence in email, right? So I'd say that our experience over the past year with trying to stand up an SDR function made me absolutely convinced I've got lower confidence in telephone, right? Like I just don't feel like people have that anymore. Many of our clients, they don't have phone numbers. I mean, if you talk to somebody at Meta, it's going to be, a Blue Jeans meeting, right? It's going to be a, web conference kind of call as opposed to a phone number. They just don't have phone numbers to call. And moreover, I don't know about you, but like, I don't answer my cell phone anymore, right? If it's a number and I don't know exactly who it is, I let it go to voicemail. And most often it doesn't go to voicemail because they know darn well that, if they leave a voicemail, you're never getting back to them. And now you're going to know who it is that's calling you. The only time you ever answer the phone is out of curiosity. It's like, this number's called me 20 times in the last month. I might as well get it out of my life by having a conversation. So, I would say that email is proving to be highly effective for us. It's just a matter of, reframing our thinking around it. I'll tell you a great story. We used to have a spray and pray approach to our email outbound. Our sales team were so sure that, if anybody ever looked at this email, that they better make sure that every one of our features and every element of our proposition, our USP was in this email. We had such verbose and long emails because people were so sure that nobody was ever going to read them. And so if they did, we would spray and pray. We would hope that there would be something in there that would catch their interest. And Deliverability Ninja really kind of helped us understand that there's a vast difference between a conversation starter and then an opportunity closer. And so we've really sort of pieced these things apart a lot more. And our confidence in email is higher than it's ever been, as long as you're starting the conversation in the right way.
Sounds good. So starting the conversation. That sounds like an amazing point. Do you have any metrics on hand as to like what companies you've managed to start a conversation with? I know that you have a couple of big ones on the plate.
Yeah. I mean, Roblox, Bose, Nike, these are big companies, right? These are big companies that we've been trying to penetrate for years now, going to research conferences, meeting these people at their offices. And all of these conversations were just too weighty and we were putting too much on the line at one point in time. Whereas now what we found is the sort of lightweight, the most effective thing, and it was Deliverability Ninja's idea that we do this, is just start giving away examples of our reports. So we'll think a lot about an industry and which of our reports, we publish 130 reports annually, which one would really be a no-brainer. Like, of course they'd say yes, they would want that report. And we start relationship off with a gift. We give them one report, and that makes it really easy for them to say yes. They're getting something of value. They're getting it for free. It gets them into a conversation. They get a chance to receive one of our reports, see what's in it. And at that point, we don't need to go into lengths to tell them the benefits and the features. They're kind of experiencing the product firsthand, and it's making the conversations that ensue, a lot more meaningful to them and to us.
For sure. Like, I love the approach of handing the leads a lead magnet and then taking the conversation from there. So, sounds like we've been working together for the past 60 days and you've managed to get about 24 leads generated from companies like you mentioned, Roblox, Nike, Snapchat, Boss, and a lot and other blue chip companies.
Yep.
Could you describe the time commitment that it required you in the past 60 days?
Yeah. There was some intensity at the start, just educationally, right? Like, I'm not sure it was really necessary for the process, but Deliverability Ninja was kind of helping us understand what was going on behind the scenes. And so I'd say that first month, Deliverability Ninja was setting up a lot of stuff, having a lot of conversations with us, sort of patiently walking us through what they already knew, but that we had no idea what was going on. And then from there, we're kind of in a groove now where I'd say, don't think our AEs are spending more than 3 hours a week on this. There's a little bit of, what's the campaign? What's the industry? Who do we want to target? Let's think about the brands that we want to reach out and offer a free report to. But then aside from that, everything is sort of now fairly routine. I think that the copy writing part is maybe in some ways the most important part. And it's not that we're not spending as much time thinking about it. It's just we've gotten better at it over time. So I'd say that we're spending a little bit less time on copywriting, mainly because we've figured out what works and what doesn't work. But I would say, at the height, maybe 5, 6, 7 hours a week in the early days is now becoming more like 2, 3 hours a week. And the results, I was really concerned when we started this process that I was asking busy salespeople to learn a new thing and get involved in a new process, but they're loving it. And the reason why is because they like to sell. And who doesn't like, having warm leads from the brands that we've mentioned at the volumes that we've mentioned coming into your lives. So our salespeople, after some trepidation in the first month, are now firm believers as we get towards the end of the second month.
Perfect. Based on the results so far, where do you see your business in 6 to 12 months from Deliverability Ninja?
Yeah, I feel like, once you develop an outbound motion, let's be honest, we had a strong right arm and a weak left arm, right? And so at least now we're building up that left arm. We're getting it bigger and bigger. I only see us doing more of this, getting that outbound motion stronger and stronger, increasing volume, increasing frequency, getting smarter about segmentation. So where does this work? When does it work? Where does it work best? I can say that after 17 years, I know our customers well enough to know that there's a time of year when this conversation is really welcome and wanted. And there's a time of year when it's kind of inconsequential. The budget's spent. They've made their decisions. They've moved on. So I can really see us over time using, just frequency and a number of other measures to, build up huge surges of business on the timeframes that make sense to our customers. And as we figure that out, what's the life cycle of a decision within their organization? That's when I think we'll get really capable.
Sounds amazing. So it sounds like you're super optimistic about building your left arm, and I love to hear that. Question for you. What surprised you about Deliverability Ninja, and did you have any misconceptions before starting?
Well, it was all sort of new territory. And I have to admit, the reason why we got started with Deliverability Ninja is because they wrote a really effective, lead magnet email that captured exactly what was going on in my head. All the changes that are going on with the mail service providers, is sort of looming in the minds of CEOs. Like, how am I going to do this when I'm limited? Prior to Deliverability Ninja reaching out to us, we'd already had our wrist slapped, I think, 3 times by Microsoft, who had told us in one way or another that we'd done it wrong. And we didn't really know the rules very well. And so we kept just stumbling and tripping into into the problem. And so I got an email actually from you, Namit, that sort of said, "Hey, were you aware that this was going on?" And I was just vaguely aware of that at the time. And then offering a solution to that, which made it really easy for me to say, yeah, that's me. Like, that's my problem. That's the situation I'm facing right now. And it wasn't long after that we started working with Deliverability Ninja, again, for the same reason for our customers. We were at a point in the decision cycle where this email came in at just the right time and sparked a conversation that gave us a solution to the problem that we were facing at that moment.
I remember that. I remember that very well. I remember we were having a lot of deliverability issues when we started. And I remember getting those notifications about how messages aren't going to customers, sometimes to warm prospects. So glad to see all that's fixed now. If someone was on the fence about working with us, what would you, Dan, tell them?
Yeah, I'd say trust an expert, right? You can't know everything about everything, but what you can do is figure out who knows more about something than you do. And in our early conversations with Deliverability Ninja, I think the things that got me off the fence were just the background of the people involved. Not only are they building a tool to help sales organizations deliver more outbound messages, but they previously worked on the other side of big organizations that were trying to prevent sales messages from getting through and into the corporation. I think that was the one thing that made me think, who better to help us figure this out than somebody whose job it was to try to keep us out in the past. So that was really helpful for me to make the decision. From there, I'd say the sort of hands-on approach that Deliverability Ninja has given us so far has made it so that I think we would have failed had we tried to rush the implementation. Had we had, that first month, some conversation, some technology set up, and then left to our own devices, I think our salespeople would have struggled and failed. And so I think that hands-on approach has really got us to where we are today.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate all the kind words. So, any final thoughts you would like to tell the viewers at this point?
Yeah, I would say that we're up cycles and down cycles. The thing that you need to do is set up mechanisms and processes where you're doing the right things all the time. And certainly, when the economy is in a boom, you'll do better. When it's not doing so well, you'll at least be able to hold your own. And we really think of it in terms of not, is the overall pie shrinking or growing, but more, can we capture more of the pie that's out there right now? There's so many of our customers that are thinking about where to spend their money. And sometimes it's on direct competitors, and sometimes it's just on something completely different. And so we kind of have to get into their world. We don't have to be too aggressive, but we do have to make sure that we're at least considered and at least a part of the conversation. And the only way to do that is through outbound. If you just sit back on your heels and wait for people to come to you, sometimes they're never going to come. And so, a great example is Nike. We've wanted Nike as a client since we started the business 17 years ago. We'd never managed to sort of figure out how to entice them or lure them into our world. Finally, with a proper outbound motion, we're having conversations. So what's more to ask?
I love that. Well, what I would love to do right now is hop a little bit deeper into Ypulse itself. And I'm super curious to know about the early days of Ypulse and why it was started in the first place.
Yeah. Back when we began Ypulse, we were just kind of having fun with accessibility for young people. It was 2007. Facebook had just started to emerge, and college students were this really difficult audience to target. And so we felt that we finally had the means to reach out to young people independent of their household or their families or mailing them something. And so that really got us started. We worked sort of on a boutique sort of consultancy basis with a number of different brands. Just found that the issues they were facing were consistent. They all had the same problems. They all wanted to ask the same questions. And after asking the same questions for brand after brand after brand, we got a little bored, honestly, and frustrated with doing the same things over and over again. and decided, listen, why don't we just ask this once and sell it to as many people as needed? And so in the early days of Ypulse, we had this sort of aha moment of building up a repository of information that every brand could take advantage of. Over the years, it's just gotten bigger and bigger. We collect tens of millions of data points every year across 400,000 interviews that we conduct with young people across 7 countries. And so the scale has gotten bigger and bigger, and more of our business is concentrated and focused on selling these subscriptions as opposed to solving the kind of unique problems. And with that, we've had to change. It feels like we've had 3 business models over the course of the years. It's easy when you're sort of a services consulting firm to find that one client with that one project. It's harder to then find the right people within an organization that have the decision rights to be able to, spend 6 figures on an information stream. And so we've really learned a lot about our customers, how their organizations work. We deal with blue chip Fortune 500 companies almost exclusively. We've learned a lot about the procurement process, which I knew nothing about in the early days. And so, over time, you just learn more and more about what makes your customers tick. Once you get that sort of critical mass of customers, I kind of feel like it was only yesterday, but once we got past 25, 30 customers on the subscription platform, now we just sort of follow their lead. The things that they're more interested in, we provide more of. The things that are less interested, we provide less of. And then addition of AI to our space is just a game changer. So that'll be the next inflection point that allows us to really harness those tens of millions of data points collected over the better part of a decade. So hundreds of millions of data points, and be able to sort of get that into people's hands a little bit faster. They won't have to do quite as much work to get the answers that they need thanks to AI.
Well, that sounds amazing. So what I heard is a journey from a boutique consulting company to having that aha moment, working with the big brands in the world, and now being a leader in the next space, which is using this data with AI and the next inflection space. So it sounds like an amazing journey. How did you, Dan, personally get so much into the data space? Because that's a very, very vast and a very unique space itself.
Yeah, I've been a market researcher now for 33 years, but yeah, it was always sort of with large services firms. I spent a little bit of time over on the software side of it, worked for SPSS and a couple of other software platforms that helped collect data from people. But really about 17 years ago, started to realize that young people were acting differently, behaving differently. And so really wanted to focus down on that. And I'd say that over the last 17 years have learned that as young people form their identities and decide who they want to be, there's so much decision making going on. They're accepting certain brands into their lives and they're rejecting different brands from their lives. And those decisions tend to be durable. They're almost permanent, to the point where you get to be in your 50s and you buy the same brand of everything. You don't switch anything anymore, whether it's, the toothpaste you use or the car you drive or the clothes you wear. At a certain point as a consumer, you tend more towards the familiar than the new and the innovative. And so really find that from a consumer marketing perspective, young people are where it's at.
Yeah. So for young people, since you've been researching for the past 30 years, 17 years at Ypulse, you've probably seen a lot of generations and like their different habits and how they change over time.
Yeah.
With the use of so much social media and lower attention spans, how optimistic are you about the future? And do you think that's affecting the younger generations?
Yeah. Certainly we kind of we've seen millennials sort of come of age, and the decisions that they were making when they were teenagers about the clothes that they wear and the candy that they buy is entirely consistent with now how they're raising their own families now that they're in their 40s. It's definitely your approach to life is kind of set from the start. The problems that you're trying to solve and the solutions that you think will solve the problems in the world. And so it doesn't matter what life stage you're at, you're kind of bringing the same tool set along with you. And of course, the biggest mistake that you can make is to think that, the next generation is going to make decisions the same way. In fact, generations zig and zag. They tend to look at the older generations and critique them. I'm a proud member of Generation X, but millennials looked at Generation X and thought, sex, drugs, and rock and roll is not a sustainable business model. I mean, let's change that. And they took a hard left, and many of the things that were important to young people as Gen X were opposite of important. unimportant to young millennials. Gen Z is now looking up at millennials and critiquing a lot of things that they're doing and taking different approaches. I'd say that technology at some level is an enabler of what's already there from a value system. And so, let's take a perfect example, the internet. The internet in the hands of different generations did entirely different things. So, Xers like Bezos and Elon Musk, they saw the early internet and they made, marketplaces and commercial environments where you could buy and sell stuff, pay people. Then Mark Zuckerberg came along, as a millennial, what he wanted to do is sort of connect people and, figure out where your friends were and what they were doing. So social media kind of reflects in millennials very much that communal aspect and the importance of friendships and relationships. And now, we're on to Gen Z, and, what they're all about is, optimizing things, getting the 80 for the 20 and getting in and getting out with whatever it is that they kind of need. My 9-year-old daughter is enamored with ChatGPT. She talks to it like she would talk to a friend. And definitely would say that was in her before she ever started using ChatGPT. She picks up ChatGPT and she uses it to sort of accomplish the things in her life that she does. I pick up ChatGPT and I do completely different things to accomplish the things that are important to me in my life. So while I would say that technology is accelerating behaviors and changes, these generations are who they are from the start, and they use technologies in different ways. Now, I definitely would say that from an attention perspective, it means that as you're talking to young people, you've got even less time. We've done studies over the years to show how the amount of time that we have to interact with young people is shrinking each year over and over again. We used to be able to have a 15-minute conversation or interview with them or survey them for 15 minutes. And then that changed and it was 13, and then it changed and it was 11. And now it's under 10 minutes. Most of the interactions that we have with young people when they're answering our questions, they're on their mobile device. They're in between, one thing and another. So we really can't count on them to have a lot of time to spend with us. So we've really got to get the 80 for the 20 in the least possible amount of time. And that's how they live their life on every level, whether it's school, whether it's sports. They don't want to sit and watch a 3-hour baseball game, but they love a 15-minute highlight reel that shows them the 80 for the 20.
Yeah, well, I feel like you're speaking about me at this moment as like, yeah, I think I'm on the borderline of like millennial and Gen Z. So yeah, like I cannot watch a 3-hour baseball game or any sport for matter. But what I'll do is after the game's over, maybe in between, check scores and then watch highlight reels to see the best moments. I love that. So sounds like you really need to keep up with all these trends. And in order for companies to be successful, they need to understand that what they sold 20 years ago or maybe 10 years ago is not going to be the same. Like you cannot sell things the same way.
At some level, this has been going on since the start of time, right? We had an agrarian culture where, fathers taught largely sons in the field all the things that they would need to know. That now we're in the information age where, my kids don't ask me questions anymore. They've got much better sources of information than dad, right? And whether it's Google for my oldest, my son who's 27, turning 28, he had Father Google in his life from the start. Now my youngest has got ChatGPT in her life to answer questions. So it definitely is it's a rapidly changing world where, the tools that people have access to and the age that they have access to them are completely different. If I have any concerns, it's that some of the youngest members of our society are kind of on the front lines of these sort of technological changes. I look back at social media and think maybe we didn't quite do that right. The youngest members of our society were the ones that were the heaviest users of social media at the earlier stages of their lives. I think we'll look back on that and regret it. I'm not sure whether we're doing it right on ChatGPT or AI technologies either, but here we go again. Young people are embracing these tools first and using them without a lot of guidance or guidelines. And we'll have to see whether that results in good things or bad things happening next.
That's a very interesting take. I think, yeah, like maybe too early to decide the effect of, or like for most people to see. Social media, I agree with you. I do think that there's a huge consumption, and it's really hard to control as parents, or like even for myself, what I'm consuming. And I constantly find myself consuming stuff I don't want to on a conscious level.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Indeed. Don't get me started on TikTok. They're not a client currently, and I don't know if I really want my 9-year-old. She doesn't have TikTok on her phone yet, and I'm keeping an eye out for when that first emerges because I feel like at a minimum I have to have a long conversation with her before she gets started down that path.
perfect. So hopping on to the last few questions, this one's one of my favorite ones, and I wish I asked you this sooner. It's like, so why Pulse? It works with the world's biggest brands: Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook. What I'm most interested in is which was your first big brand deal and how did it come about?
Yeah, if I look back, we've had a long, long relationship with Facebook. It's been probably a decade now, and it started on the project, research for hire specific projects. Establishing trust is all about, authority, right? And what do we know and how do we know it? Where do we learn it? And so I feel like, after 17 years, there's a bit of okay, we've done this, we've seen a few things, we know a few things. Another part of the sort of trust or authenticity for us is, is the fact that we just do so much of it, right? So you can take the biggest research company in the world and they aren't doing 400,000 interviews with young people annually, right? They'll do a project here and a project there. For them, it's more of a sampling issue. So how do I get access to these people as opposed to we live, eat and breathe their lives? Everything we read, everything we write is sort of in the pursuit of understanding young people. So that tends to that specialization tends to focus you. But I have to admit over the years, I'll remember it like it was yesterday. MTV didn't think much of us, didn't really want to talk to us. They thought that they knew more about young people than we did. But sure enough, patiently over time, we just kept, knocking at the door. And eventually they came to recognize that maybe we did know more about young people than they did. And now Viacom's one of our biggest clients. So I guess it's a matter of better know your stuff. You better know it better than anybody else in the space. And then you better be persistent. We've taken a long time to develop the 75 customers that we have right now. And while they're all great customers, each and every one of them takes 2 to 3 years to sort of cultivate and develop. And then even once they're a customer, they may not be in the right spot and appreciating the full power of what you can bring to their lives. So, certainly you can have an early failed relationship with one of these big brands. So when we get a new customer, we that's when the work starts, quite frankly. Getting them in the door is the easy part, making sure that we establish ourselves with them firmly as a source for them to rely on day in and day out. That's the hard part.
So sounds like establishing trust, a lot of persistence, patience, and getting that foot in the door and eventually just doing great work.
Yeah.
This also leads to Navipulse now doing 400,000 surveys per year. It's probably the biggest data company out there.
For specialized on youth, I'd imagine Nielsen probably, collects tens of millions of interviews annually, but really, they'll start at 18 years of age and that 13 to 17 teenage years, it's so formative. And most of these companies kind of avoid it. It's risky. And it's also, you have to do it very well. Connecting with a teenager and eliciting their thoughts and opinions, you can't take your lousy survey that you just asked a 50-year-old and spring it on a 15-year-old and expect to be successful. They don't think about it the same way. And this goes back to your attention span issue. We learned very early on that our questions have to be written as though 140 characters is the maximum length. Reading words is work to younger generations. That's why they're so much more interested in visual and video-based content. So we really have to make sure that we get to the heart of the matter quickly and with as few words as possible.
That makes a lot of sense. Really interesting take on how you do things and how you do specialized service. So, as my last question, I would love to know what advice you would have for younger entrepreneurs trying to make something as big as Ypulse.
Yeah. This is my 6th company that I've created, and I've made a ton of mistakes along the way. They say that 1 in 10 small businesses succeed. I didn't know that, I would have to start that many in order to become successful. And I would even debate whether Ypulse is as successful as I would like it to be at this point. But all that aside, nothing happens until somebody sells something, right? And so figuring out what the customer wants and needs and then delivering on that is the first part of the problem. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs get really stuck in the mode of what they're going to produce instead of who they're going to produce it for and what the need is that they're going to satisfy, particularly on the technology side. Just because you can do something from a technology perspective doesn't mean that anybody will really want or value that. So I'd say that the early days are just kind of establishing that value. Who are those, core key customers that sort of create a critical mass? And then sometimes you have to be super careful. There's some evidence that if you get a customer that's too big, too early, and too dominant, that then what you kind of become is a solution provider to them and them only. So there's this tension between creating something that brands value is generic enough that a multiple of brands value it as opposed to a single brand values it. Then from there, once you've got that sort of core kernel of your early users, they become your jet fuel, right? They're the ones that you can ask questions of. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going face to face and visiting many of our customers, talking to them about what we're planning from an AI perspective, getting their feedback, getting a sense of what they value, what they think, is just sort of a parlor trick. And then more importantly, where they want to see us making investments moving forward. And then whether they feel like there's enough value in it for them to kind of fund those investments. And we've never raised outside capital. So everything we've done has been one way or another funded by our customers through spending their money in our direction for the thing we're trying to provide. So the thing that I would say is, be patient, establish value, and then once you've got a core cluster of customers, just they'll show you the way. If you're listening, drive through town with the windows rolled down. Keep listening all the time. You'll hear things along the way that'll sort of help you indicate that you're either approaching product market fit, or in some cases, you'll realize that you're falling away from product market fit. And that's one real learning that we've had as an organization is product market fit. You don't just get there and stay there. You actually have to keep applying yourself to maintaining product market fit because the world changes and the competitive space changes, technology changes. You've got to make sure that you're constantly reevaluating what it is that you're delivering, how you're delivering it, and whether that's going to work for the customers based on what they're doing. Smith Corona was a fine company at one point. They're no longer with us, and that's for a reason. They didn't drive with the windows rolled down.
Perfect. Well, that was really helpful. I think I have a lot of takeaways for myself for how to run the business, and I hope the viewers have that too. At the end of the day, you got to be patient, persistent, consistently deliver value, and drive with the windows rolled down. I love that. I might copy that someday, but yeah.
I stole it from Peter Drucker, so you can have it. And Peter's no longer with us, and so I don't know that anybody needs a royalty on that one.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you for your time.
All right, Nana.